Catapulted in the spotlight by the popularity of the San Francisco sound, and with two top 10 singles, the band went from playing free concerts in the park to one of the decade's most highly sought after and most highly paid performers. There would be no more top 40 hits.
We had the power of amplifiers. And so when we wanted to make a musical statement as electric instrument players, all we really had to do was turn up.
Considered by critics and fans alike as the band at its creative and artistic height, the third album opened with the overdubbed howl of electronic feedback. This was no collection of 3-minute pop songs, but a densely intertwined and improvisational set of 15-minute-plus suites. True to its counterculture roots, after bathing at Baxter's, was unremittingly uncommercial. Battling with RCA censorship and dealing with subject matters far beyond the mainstream, album sales remained strong throughout the decade despite the lack of AM radio airplay, driven in part by the natural fit of the psychedelic sound, with exposure provided by the counterculture's own barely commercial underground or progressive stations found on the FM band. But radio wasn't the only medium showcasing the band's mind-bending sounds. Both Canadian and domestic television featured performances on a number of popular variety shows.
We open this first show of this 21st year with the #1 rock group of the country. For the youngsters, the Jefferson Airplane. Let's hear it. Jefferson Airplane.
Are the crown of creation.
However, as the decade wound on and the sound of the Jefferson Airplane became increasingly more political, reflecting the unrest in the streets, network broadcasters and their sponsors ceased to promote the band. At the end of the 1960s, the Jefferson Airplane remained hugely popular, playing both the Peace and Love Fest of Woodstock and the Murderous Disaster at Altamont.
Point out, however, that Jack and Yorma played on long after they should have stopped playing.
Again, it was one of those situations where you took comfort in being able to hold an instrument in your hand, you know, and keep playing.
Marty was protecting somebody who was getting abused. I do the same thing.
Marty did jump in the middle of it, and we did continue playing, and it was. I remember thinking at the time, you know, boy, what is he doing? What's going to happen? And it was everybody's was wide-eyed.
I hitchhiked back to San Francisco after I said, actually, I ain't waiting any longer.
But with the turn of the decade, the trappings of psychedelia, innovative and original just 3 years previously, had been co-opted by the very consumer culture that had been the target of the movement's contempt. The Jefferson Airplane, with its members deliberately flaunting their LSD, cocaine, and other drug use, was teetering on the brink of descending into self-parody. To complete their contractual obligations with RCA Records, a greatest hits album was released, but even the predictable phallic punning of the title seemed coked out, tired, and limp. Casadys, a frequent moonlighter from the band, teamed up with Kaukonen, playing and recording as Hot Tuna, often opening when the Airplane toured. Kantner recorded a solo album. Already coupled with Slick, he assembled a virtual who's who of West Coast musicians to back him, including members of the Grateful Dead and Crosby, Stills and Nash. A science fiction concept album blessed by author Robert Heinlein, the LP was nominated for the prestigious Hugo Award. Paul named his band the Jefferson Starship. Balin, marginalized by the other members, left the band he'd founded. Recording under their new vanity label Grunt Records and freed of RCA censorship, the Jefferson Airplane took their next album from the surreal and into the bizarre.
Sticking in mine Haken, sticking in mine heart.
The poorly received album Long John Silver was the last from the Jefferson Airplane.